strategist and one of the most successful fundraisers I know. So he has worked with a lot of Southeast Asia's biggest and brightest unicorns. Today we are very happy that he's here sharing his experience, his perspective about technology, about ASEAN, about Asia and the world. Let's welcome Chris.
Thank you very much, Ruben, and thank you very much for the Kuan Yew School of Public Policy and having me, and thank you very much, students, for coming after your lunch to listen to me talk today. I'm simply delighted to be here because the three biggest topics in the world right now is not Trump, it's not Kim Kardashian, it's not even Brexit. The largest topics in the world right now should be the 21st Asian century, technology, and the miracle that is Southeast Asia. My name is Tran, head of Northridge Partners, and we run an investment banking platform for Southeast Asian technology entrepreneurs. Who's talking to you today? Well, after managing investment funds and growing technology investments within them, we saw the need for entrepreneurs in the region to receive financial advisory from people that understood technology, strategy, and Southeast Asia, and our firm's history as either investor, operator, or advisor. We've completed over 40 transactions. The agenda for today, we are going to welcome you to the story of the Asia-Pac technology, M&A, and investment trend. We're going to show you how we're living the dream in what is the Southeast Asian miracle. And then we're going to play and be part of the race to the top for which country, and I'm sure most of you already know, is the highest ranking country for the number of unicorns created. And so welcome. APAC, the Asia Pacific, not Europe, not Latin America, or any other region in the world, is either the second or the first opportunity set when it comes home to technology and value creation. Against the trend of protectionism, against the trend of trade wars, Brexit, China versus USA, we have rising, peaceful, more integrated development. A lack of physical infrastructure in Southeast Asia has enabled technology to either fix these gaps or avoid the need for physical infrastructure altogether. It is in part due to China's lack of commerce or physical retail that we have the creation of Alibaba today. We see creation and leapfrogging of technology. People talk about digital disruption. That is 100% wrong. Because what we have in Asia is not digital disruption, we have pure digital creation, when there wasn't anything there in the first place. We have the leapfrogging. We have China skipping the credit card phase altogether. And the region is the birthing home to technology giants across the spectrum of e-commerce, fintech, consumer, big data, AI, manufacturing, supply chain, etc. So, what's the 10,000-foot view? We have Greater China, $300 billion in 2017 alone in big data, AI. Tech is a national priority. 4.0 was coined in Germany. China's answer, China 2025. Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent are supersized. We go to India. Trade tensions make India a net beneficiary. Demonetization and ADCA, which is biometric identity system, is driving banking and digital services adoption, resolving the problem of the underbanked in India at a scale that is unprecedented. When in the US, they're still struggling with a universal identity card, in India, your universal identity is your biography. And we turn to Japan and South Korea, rivals along with China for the most of the last 2 millennia. What's happening there? In Japan, you have the SoftBank Fund, $100 billion plus, changing the market with the pure force of its funds and investment allocation decisions. You also have South Korea. After a decade of substandard returns in China, South Korea is actively deploying funds elsewhere in India, Southeast Asia. As they face a domestic slowdown in their economy, they need to invest their excess funds elsewhere. And of course, Southeast Asia. Donald Trump is not only a gift to the Chinese, he is a gift to Southeast Asia. Trade tensions make Southeast Asia a net beneficiary. Significant investment in Indonesian e-commerce has created 3 e-commerce unicorns in Indonesia alone. Singapore is driving fintech development, encouraged by a favourable regulator. VCs are raising record funds, and Vietnam now is China's China. So show me the money. Because I don't care where you're from, whether you study politics, whether you study marketing, whether you study science, the money talks. And the money is making an unprecedented level of noise. M&A investment remains strong and growth continues. There are larger and later rounds that are getting done. Now in private technology investing, we typically call these rounds angel and then follow the alphabet. And what we're seeing is later and larger rounds getting done for technology companies. When I first came to Singapore 8 years ago, you'd talk about an angel or Series A gap. We no longer talk about an A gap, we no longer talk about a B gap. Some people still talk about a C gap. But that's all changing. Startups themselves are becoming investors and acquirers. In Southeast Asia, Grab has established a venture fund, whilst Gojek, Indonesia's answer to Grab, is an active acquirer itself, having acquired 4 fintech companies in 2018 alone. US dominance of Chinese tech IPOs is fading. Alibaba, Tencent, listed in America. But since 2017, Greater China has made a strong push. Zhong'an, the insurance giant, Foxconn, the manufacturer, Xiaomi, all listed in China, not the US. And Chinese companies are welcoming their children home with dual class rights and much more flexible terms. There is no such thing as the rise of India or the rise of China. More correctly, there is the re-emergence of India and China. For most of the last 2 millennia, it was China or India, which was number 1 or number 2 in economic terms. And so the correct term is the re-emergence. Only in the last 200 to 300 years has someone else been number 1. And when China became the number 1 in 2015, in purchasing power parity terms, what did it look like? China is misunderstood. Its power is expressed in soft power, not hard power. We see this. One Belt, One Road is the Chinese version of the Great Marshall Plan to spread prosperity, to spread influence through investment, to say it's not our business how you do things. As long as we can find a way to collaborate and share, we are with you. A new leadership position, trade and sustainable development. In a perceived US absence of global leadership on these topics, you can see Xi's speech on Davos to step into that leadership position. No doubt about it, the Chinese are at the gate. The Chinese are like grandmasters on a chessboard that's called Southeast Asia, where Southeast Asian companies are pawns and pieces on that chessboard. If you look at e-commerce, for example, You have Alibaba behind Lazada, Redmart, and Tokopedia. You then have a counterattack by their fierce rival JD, which is Tencent backed, going into Traveloka for travel e-commerce. And into the fray, let's not forget Japan, which has SoftBank. You can afford a business strategy, and a business strategy will work as long as someone will fund it. And with $100 billion, business strategy has fundamentally changed, profounding the best of the brightest analysts, traditional fund managers, and re-questioning everything around business strategy that we have learned from the 20th century. If you look across food delivery, ride sharing, e-commerce, they have a near oligopolistic position in most of the majors. So rather than having a look at the company level for competitive strategy, we are now having to look at the investor level, look behind the obvious. And what does it take to win in Southeast Asia? What is the winner's DNA? The secret sauce is a mix of curry, chili, dumplings, spring roll heaven. Simply put, Western models in Southeast Asia do not work, nor do pure Chinese models. And when we look across the successful unicorns in Southeast Asia, we find at least 5 underlying themes. The most striking to us is that of the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur are what we call turtles. They are native to Southeast Asia, understand the market like no tomorrow, like no other, solving the market's problems, but bringing together with it a Western education and an ability to raise funds, to power their strategies, to power their dreams, to power the field to solve these problems and create the companies of value. Anthony Tan is a Singaporean that went to Harvard. La Hong Ming, which created Southeast Asia's first unicorn in Vietnam called VNG, went to Melbourne University in Australia. But you know what? It's only getting faster. In 2014, it took nearly 2 decades, or 18 years, to create a unicorn. And for those of you who don't know, that is a private technology company valued at $1 billion or above. By the time we arrived in 2015, you had Grab, which became a unicorn in 3 years. We are now in 2019, and last year was 2018, 3 years after 2015. And in 2018, Grab became Asia's first decacorn. So it was 10 times the value at $10 billion merely 3 years later. The only thing that scares me around the speed of change more than this is how quickly my kids are growing. Technology is not just about products and services. That would be completely a miss. Technology is fundamentally changing the game of business, the way that business is being played today. And you need to look at the top 10 companies in the world, appreciate that 7 of them are technology companies, and also appreciate that they are adopting new strategies which are technology enabled. In the 21st century, the use of technology to create platform businesses which exchange, assist and facilitate the exchange of value between participants is where it's at, not the ownership of production. Now let me pause and break that down. Your 20th century hero was General Motors, or even GE for that matter, which was supply side produced products and services of value. Your 21st century heroes are, for example, Alibaba, which has no manufacturers, but facilitates the exchange of value between manufacturers or producers to demand side, people that want to buy these products and services. Airbnb, the world's most valuable hospitality company, has no hotels. Uber, world's most valuable transportation company, has no physical cars. This is the world that we're living in. And in the world that we're living in, two of them are Chinese, with many more to come. So we're often asked, what's going on? Can you simplify what's going on? Because this feels really different. And yes, I'm telling you, we are at the end of the internet age and the beginning of a new age, the 4.0 age. And how does that stack up to the rest of history? Well, let's give you some context. It all started off when we, as human race, went through the Stone Age and learned how to control the environment. And this happened around the Middle East and Africa. We then had a massive technological leap in the industrial age, where through machines and steam power, we leveraged the human body. So after controlling the external environment, leveraging the human body, we had the internet age, where we started to leverage the human mind. And we were beginning to leverage the human body in the industrial age, stemming from Britain, which then went to the US as a former colony of Britain. And in terms of the internet age, it was Western Europe, USA, and Japan as the first Asian country in the modern era to industrialize. It went to Japan. But here we are in Industrial 4.0, big data, AI, this new age, and it is the first age where technology is truly global. This is a fundamental difference. China, India, and Southeast Asia are now in the fray. And unlike any time in history, the flow of capital, talent, and technology is truly global. And the fantastic news is here, apart from being students at LKY, you are living the dream, because we are all living in Southeast Asia right now. This is the most underrated miracle on earth. Why? Why? This is the most disparate region in the world, achieving more in 60 years than we could have imagined. It is this region that has had no internal conflicts. There was the Vietnam War, but that was more external. So no internal conflicts, and increasingly peaceful cooperation and growth. It has lifted millions, hundreds of millions out of poverty, and this region has proven that Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, and Hindus can all live together in harmony and prosper together. Let's put some context as to what we have achieved. ASEAN, or Southeast Asia, has received more foreign direct investment than China of late. ASEAN now has a higher GDP than India and the UK. ASEAN is also self-sustaining. Intertrade exceeds that of external trade. So it's no longer reliant on a mercantile export economic model that was a feature in the 20th century. People talk about the global financial crisis. That term is wrong. There was no global financial crisis. There was a financial crisis for the rest of the world except for Asia. If you look at the blue line, you'll see that China merely had a little bit of slower growth in 2008. If you look at the green line, the rest of Asia was in clear positive territory. And if you look at the red line, that was the rest of the world going into the deepest recession since the 1930s. Asia learned the lesson of 97, 98. And it showed that lesson was learnt in 2008. And instead of currency crisis, military coup in Asia. You had instead countries needing bailout by Germany in the European Union instead. And what do our heroes look like? Well, these are our heroes. In Southeast Asia, you have 400 companies worth 10 million and above. You have 100 companies worth at least 100 million, all vying to be the next unicorn. You have 10 unicorns with at least a valuation of $1 billion and above, and 2, Grab and Gojek, which are worth 10 billion and above. And I'd like to invite you now to a race towards the top. How are the countries vying in this technology race to use technology to improve their economies, to create these new unicorns as a byproduct? Malaysia and Brunei, equal fourth. Malaysia, a new direction needs to be ascertained. It's otherwise a country stuck in the middle. It's a middle income country, but its population at around 30 million is not simply large enough to produce a unicorn. And Brunei, a small but wealthy country, hasn't really made significant sway in terms of the investment that it could have made in terms of technology and being a participant. Myanmar, great population of 50 million, a frontier market for the right investor, but there are more investable options elsewhere. Thailand, a big country, population of 70 million. Rare distinction, Thailand, the only country in Southeast Asia that was not colonized. High quality manufacturing, a health and tourism hub. It's a high income market, but slow growth, hence Thailand 4.0, as a government initiative to lift the country out of the middle income trap. The ease of business is difficult, and the political situation, not a deal breaker, but certainly hard to interpret. The Philippines, a large country, 110 million, resource rich, and had the highest GDP per capita in the 1960s for Southeast Asia. A young population, but the connectivity infrastructure far behind, and investment in the technology ecosystem behind as well. Zerpass was a previously Philippine-listed unicorn. Unfortunately, is not anymore. And most recently, we had Chinese, Tencent, and KKR, US, lead a joint investment in Voyager. So we may see this situation change. But let's go on to the podium. And on the podium is number 3, Vietnam, population of 100 million. Now, the only nation to have beat the United States of America in a war. A young population, a manufacturing boom, outsourced center for software development, however, an unproven track record regarding foreign investments and returns. But VNG was Southeast Asia's first unicorn. It is backed by Tencent and Goldman Sachs. It is a combination of a chat platform and a gaming platform, and as many other investments as well. Vietnam should be proud. It is on the podium. Of course, Indonesia. Population of nearly 300 million. The largest Muslim nation in the world is not in the Middle East, it is in Asia. And it is also a democracy. And of course, you cannot ignore the size and the growth impact that Indonesia has. Governance, ease of business, is all trending in the right direction, thank you to Jokowi. And investment flows are rewarding these moves. However, it lacks manufacturing, or at least high-value manufacturing. And infrastructure is under pressure. It has 4 unicorns though. Traveloka, online travel, Gojek, as we all know, is Uber and now a super app. Well, the Kalapak and Tokopedia to round off e-commerce. And I'm sure this isn't a surprise to anyone. Singapore, number one. Singapore has the largest percentage-wise diaspora of Chinese anywhere in the planet. It is simply the New York of Southeast Asia, facilitating investment trends thanks to its low tax, transparency, and rule of law. The tremendous government support of the technology ecosystem makes Singapore a clear top 5 destination. Singapore can be proudly there and does belong there with its peers of Silicon Valley, Israel, Berlin, Shenzhen as a top technology center. And in a most remarkable feat, 5 unicorns for a population of not even 6 million people. Grab, we all know, Lazada is e-commerce. SEA, formerly known as Garena, which is a gaming, content, and e-commerce conglomerate. Trax, which is actually an Israeli company that does big data around retail, is headquartered in Singapore. And Razer, which is a gaming hardware equipment company moving on to financial services and over-the-top, over-the-hardware layer services. Singapore has made a commitment, put its money where its mouth is, and I was absolutely amazed to find out that Singapore Management University has a thing called protege class. And this is where its cohort are given $25,000 to invest in a startup. That's right. When you enroll into this program at this university, you are given someone else's money. You are given $25,000 to invest in a startup, and that's part of your learning experience. I simply can't see that anywhere else in the world, and it speaks to how innovative and committed to the ecosystem that Singapore is. So what does this all mean to us? What does this all mean to you? Singapore is the continuing miracle. Physical war is unlikely as there's too much physical infrastructure and peaceful development at stake. Also, no one really wants it. Whilst natural resources remain critical, competition will be over the fluid flows of technology and capital. Also, this region has multiple choices regarding alliances and partners as we move from the US being the only superpower and the victor of the Cold War to a multipolar world. Trade war makes Southeast Asia a net beneficiary as global investors de-risk China and USA exposure and search for other growth and investment options. We are in the Asia-Pacific century. We are living the dream and creating the miracle. And I leave you with one of the Chinese boats at the height of its naval strength. And you can see it's some 5 times larger than the boat from Europe that travel around the world. Thank you for your attention. Yes.
I was wondering about the rivalry that has been building up between China and the US over the last year or two. So a few years ago it was all about cooperation, but that's changed, right? And how you see that developing. I mean, a simple example, if I communicate with my business partner, my Indonesian business partner on WhatsApp, I'll think about going to China twice because I can't use WhatsApp there.
Sure. Yeah, so I knew I was going to get a question around this, and it's an excellent question. And one of the questions we receive a lot from our clients and people that we talk to is this whole rivalry, it's a short-term issue, it's a medium-term issue, it's a long-term, what should we all do about it? let me say this, the rivalry is unlike, if you like, the US rivalry with Japan in the 1980s. And what we had then was the Plaza Accord, and it was around a trade surplus issue. Yeah? This rivalry is not around the trade surplus. It is around the rules of engagement for international trade. And in 2001, something happened which I don't think much attention was paid to, or enough attention. And that was when China joined the WTO, right? And what this rivalry is about is around the rules of engagement. Look, is free trade a good idea? Sure, yes, of course. But then the definition of, well, let's have free trade around all these things, but technology is a sensitive area. Oh, no, actually, software and then hardware and then, banks and financial institutions. So, what gets carved out in terms of freely tradable, what gets left in? It's around, of course, the technology transfer issues, around, different models around technology. So the US is long known for having a system which patents technology and which gives you a right to monopolistically use that technology. The Chinese ecosystem is very different. It's around technology is there for all to use, and whoever can use it best to create a system or a company which uses it best, which is of value, which is of scale, is the winner. And so the trade war is an issue that's not going to go away soon. It's an issue where, whether it is going to go away soon or not, the reality is participants are looking to de-risk because assumptions around the future have fundamentally changed. Will we see some sort of ceasefire and peace around it? Yes. But will there be continuous tension for years to come? Yes.
Do you feel countries willing to decide, let's take Cambodia or Laos, for example, strong Chinese influence, not only in technology. If we fast forward 5 years, will the government there and companies there need to decide, okay, do I use Chinese technology or do I use US technology? Right now they can use both. Right? Do you think there's going to be a scenario where countries need to decide?
Yeah, this is really interesting because what we see is a fundamental misunderstanding around China, and I don't think that China is actually seeking to be a hegemony. So it's not seeking to exert its power in a very unilateral sense. So, in the 80s, there was a view that when we had Japan actually be the leader, you'd have maybe an Asian sphere led by Japan. I don't think there will be necessarily the same thing. China is interested in its own development and peaceful cooperation with others. That's why it's happy to do business with governments and countries very different ideological. So in terms of alliances being formed in camps, I actually do not see that. I see a very pragmatic approach. I'll give you another example. The Philippines, the South China Seas, and yet that didn't stop Tencent and KKR making a massive investment in Voyager. I think that there's enough people and there's enough will to actually coexist and get along with peaceful cooperation and development that we will not see such alliances. We've had one, it didn't work out well, and people are looking for new models of operating in the future.
Okay,
So-
understanding that analytics is big time, the AI is big time. I'm just wondering for Singapore, where is our opportunities? Because if you want analytics talents, I think Indians and Filipinos, they're very good. But in terms of Singapore citizens, so-called, where is our opportunities to tap on these trends, so-called?
Massive. Singapore has unbelievable opportunities. Number one, Singapore is trusted. So you can't have big data and analytics without the data in the first place. And Singapore is a trusted jurisdiction for the collection of that data. I'll give you a real example. Singapore has what we all, sort of call ERP2, but we don't appreciate their significance. ERP2, Singapore should be proud of. Singapore will be the first city in the world, not China, not Japan, not in the US, to have 100% probe coverage of every car, bike, bus, anything on the road, 100% coverage. And why? Because Singapore has the right governance framework, a strong government that is able to put people in the ecosystem together and make them work for greater good. So when you look at big data and AI, the ability to collect the data, to maintain first-class privacy, to protect everyone's interest, and to look at using that data to really, for business and for social good, Singapore has a great advantage there. Number two, yes, there's fantastic talent in India. Frankly, the Indians, nearly run Silicon Valley, right? Microsoft, all those companies there. China, of course, has talent, undeniably, but Singapore attracts the best of the best. And Singapore has an ecosystem which is very friendly to the right talent coming in. And the third thing about Singapore, which really gives it the edge, is the ability to attract the investment funds. Now, the reality is that so much of the funding in Southeast Asia goes through Singapore first, and that means that we get first sway of how the money is spent, where the industries can be developed, and that ultimately affects the development of AI throughout the region, not just in Singapore itself. Yes?
Thank you, Chris, for the presentation, and it's actually quite interesting to see really countries that you wouldn't immediately assume are doing so well, are in fact very close to having unicorn farms locally. I was wondering, being in this space where you're trying to match funders or investors with these organizations, where do you see the challenges lie? What is Asia still missing to go farther and improve on what they were doing here?
Thank you, that's a wonderful question. Funnily enough, Asia's big challenge is its mindset, particularly cultural, and it'll take some time. The shift we've seen in China has been absolutely amazing. The traditional mindset, and it's totally understandable, when you come from poverty so quickly, is, go to university, get a good job, right? We worked so hard to put you through university. I mean, clearly you guys have succeeded at that. And get a good job and, make a good return on all the sacrifices, right? And then as well, certainly in China had the first meritocracy, economic meritocracy, and it wasn't around entrepreneurialism, it was around education. If you were poor in China, if you did well in the education system, you got to serve the government, didn't matter where. So it was your first chance to actually have economic success. It was through education, right? So that started in China, happened in China for 2,000 years. We then had the 20th century, which was around, we'll educate you and then you can work in the office. In the office, you can produce a middle income salary and everything's great and you have this wonderful middle class boom. So the biggest challenge is, and it's changing rapidly, is to have people say, hey, mum, dad, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm just going to throw away this education at Harvard. I'm going to stop becoming a doctor or a lawyer. I'm going to fail and it's going to be okay, right? So the biggest challenge is the mindset that entrepreneurialism and taking such risks and failing is going to be okay. This stigma around I'm a failed entrepreneur, I lost all of the money that I borrowed from my friends and family. If you ask me, if a failed entrepreneur came up to me and said, Chris, I'm a business failure, I'll ask him, okay, what happened? And if he took responsibility, he or she took responsibility for it, and learned from it, I'd hire them straight away. Because you know what I've got? I've got someone that has the conviction to see a problem and to make a difference. I've got someone who's motivated. I've got someone who's going to move the dial and change it. Now, I love the entrepreneur, but there needs to be a lot of changes in the society mindset to really recognize that entrepreneurialism, it is valid, and that failure is a part of the process, and that failure is okay. So the biggest thing is mindset. and tradition and culture. Yes?
So thank you a lot for the presentation. I think it was a very useful, different narrative. It's not the narrative we're used to. And then
Thank you.
the question is about the internal politics in ASEAN.
Right.
Because I think that especially when we talk about technology and unicorns, new companies, this is a challenge which is a bit underestimated. I'm reading the Nikkei ASEAN review from the day before yesterday. Companies face higher cost as Singapore cuts foreign workers, for instance. Then you think about Malaysia and the corruption trial going on. You think about the election coming in Indonesia, and yes, Islam, the biggest Islamic country is for sure an opportunity. The halal market, for instance, but it's also a risk, in a sense, Islamization of Indonesian politics. And do you think that this can be, in the medium term, not even long term, a threat in the short, medium term to this miracle in Southeast Asia, which
Yes, and here I remain actually optimistic. Again, one of the reasons why is because digital, the internet, has changed media for good in most jurisdictions, not all. And what it means now is you can no longer control the narrative that goes out to the masses. Social media, free media, which is available in many, many jurisdictions, means that, you know, if you do something that's bad, it's going to come out there. If you are against something that's for the greater or public good, it's going to get out there. And so what we had in Indonesia, for example, is we had an amazing turnaround that I just couldn't believe happened, and it happened within 24 hours, and it was this. There was a lot of uproar around Gojek and Gojek actually being unlicensed and certain issues around it. So there was complaints to effectively the Ministry of Transport, and the Ministry of Transport said, okay, we've got to shut this down because it's unlicensed, it's uncontrolled. And then the unbelievable happened. So that happened on one day, and then the very next day, Jokowi came out, overruled his ministry, his minister, and said, we have amazing traffic issues in Indonesia, and Gojek is helping us resolve these traffic issues. Overturned, right? And that was amazing. That was like 24 hours, right? Now, in the old world, in the 1990s, right, you'd have to wait for an election or two, and, you know, God knows, right? But what we have now is we have, you know, thanks to media, which means that less people can hide, right? And you know, the public can speak. What we have is more of a social contract now. Doesn't matter where you are now, there's an increased social contract. You know, you help me with finding jobs, you create me a safe environment, it'll be fine. You don't, you know, you will get resistance. So issues will remain. There will be very difficult issues to resolve. Not everything will be fixable. Some things may not be fixed, but overall I remain very bullish because of things that technology now provides, and the socialization of media, the democratic voice being able to be heard is one of the best gifts that technology has given us. Yes?
Is there an implicit assumption that when companies become big, unicorns, companies can become excellent, or as opposed to having many small companies that are also providing service? I'm wondering the logic for having unicorns.
So why have a unicorn versus having a lot of companies instead? Yeah, thank you for that question. That's an excellent question. We're in the age of the 21st century monopoly, and That's very different from the 20th century monopoly, and we're in the age where if you look at the monopolies or the unicorns that we have now, it's all about scale. So the reason why you have these unicorns versus lots of little players is lots of little players cannot achieve scale and benefits with scale, and let me explain. One of them is the network effect. So I'm sure most of you are on Facebook or Instagram, WeChat, WhatsApp. Would you join something called No One Chat where only one person was on it? No, you wouldn't, right? So there's the network effect, that's number one. Number two, and these are all interconnected and related, is the effect of big data and AI. You need lots and lots and lots and lots of data to put into a machine, which then uses machine learning to create an AI output or insight. And you simply just need pure scale to do that. Three is that, believe it or not, there's economies of scale around funding. People get perplexed. Chris, help me raise $500,000. Hey, I'm sorry, that's really hard. What? It's only $500,000. Hey, Chris, help me raise $30 million. Yep, these are the guys you can go to. X, Y, Z. Because when you're raising larger amounts of money, the people that control that capital are getting more fees on the money that's deployed. They're earning a greater absolute return on the monies that is deployed. So believe it or not, there's actually an economy of scale when it comes to funding and the capital. So there are three good reasons why you have some large companies, and thank you for your question, versus a proliferation of smaller companies doing the same thing. Welcome.
Chris, I have a question. So how does the future look like? How do you see the landscape in maybe 3 to 5 years or even 10 years?
We're very excited about Vietnam, and as I spoke about, Vietnam to us is China's China. Now, Vietnam has two things which, for a long time, Indonesia received the bulk of the investment attention because it was the largest country, half of ASEAN, and Vietnam did it. But we're seeing an absolute shift to Vietnam because of several reasons, one of which is that it's actually got a high quality manufacturing hub that's coming up. Now with the whole China-US tensions, people are looking for alternate places to manufacture. Now the whole thing is that the China-US trade war didn't just affect, the Chinese, it affected anyone that had Chinese plants, right? So if you're a Volkswagen and you still have your most technological plant based in China that exported to the US, you got pinned, right? You were just caught in the process. So now you have, it doesn't matter if you're Chinese or not, you have any company operating and manufacturing in China looking for somewhere else to go. And Vietnam, people don't realize, you have Mazda 3 Japanese quality cars being made in Vietnam. You have Samsung TVs made in Vietnam. You will soon have mobile phones made in Vietnam, right? And so that's very interesting. The other thing about Vietnam is you have a high quality, low cost development in Vietnam. So for example, one of the world's most popular e-commerce software types is Magento. The largest outsourced software developer of Magento is Hanoi, right? They've got about 500 people cranking out that software on a global basis. So we're very excited about Vietnam, that's number one. Two, we see greater integration, and integration that's brought around by technology and ASEAN. So what we see is a lot of smart city initiatives. So we talk about big data, IoT, and what we've seen is a lot of applications in the B2C space that you can see. E-commerce, ride sharing, mobility, that's all stuff we can see. But now there's a great shift to stuff that we can't see. So what you'll see is a lot of B2B, where digital and the new economy will create absolute boom in terms of supply chain, manufacturing. You have, for example, in the Philippines, e-gates, which are biometric e-gates, which what happens is as you approach the gate, you have the biometric sensors to read your face, and as it reads your face, not even take a fingerprint, so you're not even touching the machine. It tells the authorities who you are, whether you're safe to pass, etc. And what you have is the coordination between ASEAN states of that information to catch criminals, right? To monitor the safety of trade, to reduce crime. So actually what you'll see is more integration and a lot more physical safety. There was a story that was popular a couple of years ago. So in Alibaba's home city, Hangzhou, there was 3 robbers that came to Hangzhou with guns and knives, and what they wanted to do was basically rob little shops for cash and rob people for cash. When the police caught them, these robbers were absolutely upset. Not because they were caught necessarily, but they said, we lost money. There's no cash left. There was no cash to steal, right? Because the whole economy was cashless already. So we'll actually see, and I'm very happy to see this, what I believe to be, you know, a safer physical environment as well.
I was wondering, like, the unicorns in South Asia, like Grab or some else e-commerce companies, but they are all appear after like the Amazon and Uber, so they just adopt the existing business model. Do you think there is other needs for us to like study on new technologies or to seek on other business models for the unicorns?
Sure. Thank you for your comments. We had a lot of adoption of Western style models in what we consider the first wave, and that was definitely the model where we saw Lazada came up, and that was effectively Rocket Internet. Rocket Internet were a bunch of brothers from Germany, raised lots of funds, and looked at hiring very clever individuals to look at taking those models, right-sizing to Southeast Asia and creating, right? So very much the first wave, yes, very much looked like either US or Chinese models. What we're seeing is that these companies themselves, number one, are changing into something very different. And then two, the new wave of these companies are really the centaurs, right? Versus the unicorns, they are completely different and they are right-sized for the market. So we are seeing very different models come out.
Any other questions? If not, shall we give a big round of applause for Chris? Chris, that was absolutely fascinating. I think we enjoyed ourselves and learned so much. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you.